Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and we have spent the last 2 days as Vikings reporters talking with the new members of the Minnesota Vikings. So the goal is to run through some of the most interesting clips from two guys who you could say won the press conferences. They've also won a lot of football games in their careers, but the most interesting subjects that we had an opportunity to talk with were Ryan Kelly and Jonathan Allen, both of whom could probably host their own podcasts at some point. So I'll dive into some of the questions that I asked both of those guys, and we'll give you those answers and some of the other things that I took away from the conversations. I think the biggest thing that we were looking for was, number one, why did you sign in Minnesota? I'll bring you some of those answers. And then also there was a lot of health discussions that were going on of where do you stand in terms of your health? Because if there's one big question mark about a lot of the Vikings free agent signings, it is, are they going to be at 100%? Is there risk involved and all that? So we can get into that. But it's also your night here on the show. There hasn't been any news in like, I don't know, like 20 hours or so. So what do you got? What's on your mind? What are you thinking about? And yeah, it does seem like the Aaron Rodgers saga for maybe an entire day felt over and then feels less over after some more speculation and Diana Rossini on a Dan Patrick show asked to guess where Rodgers was going to land and doubling down and saying the Minnesota Vikings. But at least for now, I think we have gotten to a point where we can say JJ McCarthy is going to be the quarterback to start the spring. And then we let God take the wheel, and whatever happens from there happens, and we'll see. But at least from the reporting, we can guess that Aaron Rodgers isn't walking through that door tomorrow. And JJ McCarthy will get his opportunity to show what he's got. And as far as the spring goes, you'd be surprised how much you can learn about somebody. Number one, where is he physically? He can be totally fine physically working out by himself, and then maybe not when he actually gets out on the field for OTAs. Or, I mean, from a mental perspective, he should be on point. But last year during this time, he had to do a lot of learning of the technique and how to throw certain routes and the footwork and all that stuff. So I think they want to assess where he is physically, where he is mentally, how he leads a team from the start that is got very, very high expectations. And they'll assess that and go from there. But at least for now, it appears that JJ McCarthy is the quarterback, and there will still be some discussion and talk about it and where he's going to go as long as he is still a free agent. And there was a report today that the Steelers' offer for Aaron Rodgers was not very impressive, kind of in the ballpark of what Sam Darnold got, which makes you think that Aaron Rodgers is likely not moving for that amount of money, which also, until the Vikings spend every last dollar of that cap space, you know that we're still going to have that lingering out there as well. But at least for now, I think we can move past having the daily, this person said that person reported that. If momentum starts to begin again with Aaron Rodgers, then we'll talk about it. But at least for now, I think that I don't want to say dead, but it's off the table for me for discussions until there is some tangible evidence that Aaron Rodgers could play for the Minnesota Vikings. That's how I'll put it, which means that we have plenty of time to talk about other stuff. And that pleases me and probably you as well. So questions, thoughts, comments. What do you want to see next from the Vikings? What's your thought on where they go from the draft? How are you feeling about this free agent class and this roster and this team maybe a week later, 2 weeks later from where they're at? Let me know what you think, and we'll have a fun discussion. Also, intern Clay has his headlines, and since there are less headlines now, he's also just got some fun questions and things to talk about. But Jonathan Harrison, who produces this show, pulled all the clips of questions that I asked Ryan Kelly and Jonathan Allen, the new Minnesota Vikings veterans. They were the most talkative during the press conferences, but I'll get to some of the other ones as well in some of my takeaways. But Ryan Kelly and Jonathan Allen were so good that I wanted you guys to hear from them some of the things that they had to say. So let's start out with Ryan Kelly. And I asked him, hey, so why are you a Minnesota Viking? And here's what he said. I'm just curious what the process was like of deciding on the Vikings and what tipped the scales for you to decide to come here.
Yeah, I mean, there was, a few different teams calling, and to be honest, I was actually on a flight when this was all going down, which is probably the worst place to be since you can't answer your phone. So big shout out to Jimmy Sexton for doing this via text message. But no, I think, there was a few teams involved, and as I started looking at it, like Minnesota was the most appealing place, and I think I can probably go into super depth into this answer, but even in the AFC South, watching some of the NFC North teams, like you watch different offensive lines throughout the year, and I think you can watch a team and how they play, their head coach, who they play for. Obviously, the NFLPA report card comes out every single year, and they're always number one or number two. So all those things kind of go into it, and I saw from afar more, descriptively, it was just how well the offensive line played together. You could tell that team really relies on the offensive line, and they're a true, band of brothers mentality, and that's what I was looking for. So I think when you couple all those things together, that's ultimately what pushed me over the edge to go to Minnesota.
So the biggest thing I took away from Ryan Kelly was that he has extremely natural leadership vibes. And when you're handing the ball over to a young quarterback and JJ McCarthy, I think that's a good thing. But he also has a little bit of an edge to him, which I think is a good thing and is necessary for the Vikings as well. And I don't have the clip, but he did talk about JJ McCarthy, and he said he has some stuff to him. And I think we all knew what he meant. Like, he's got some intensity to him, he's got some competitive nature to him. And we all saw that last year during training camp. I also asked Ryan Kelly about the interior pressure issue because I think this entire offseason, one of the main talking things around the NFL, from the combine to the draft with offensive linemen and defensive linemen, is just how much interior pressure became the thing over the last 2 or 3 years. And I did the big article on it over at purpleinsider.football. You can check that out. About the data really shows it. The data really shows that even the top 20 guards in the league have had their overall average PFF grade go down significantly as a whole over the last couple of years because there are more DTs in the Aaron Donald mold. And also, teams are using a lot more strategies to attack the middle. And they know that also offenses are not running that much on second down, especially second down and long, which has allowed for more creativity, more attacking on more downs for defenses, which results in more pressure. So I asked Ryan Kelly about just the increase in attack on the center of the offensive line and how he's been dealing with it. Right, along those same lines, it seems like, and I'm sure you watched the Super Bowl, there's a lot of freakish defensive tackles in the league. A lot of teams, like, with Brian Flores sending
Mhm.
crazy blitzes up the middle, attacking you guys. You guys in Indianapolis sustained a good interior pass protection. I guess, what was the key to that in a changing league where there's a lot of new freak defensive tackles always coming in and a lot of different types of blitzes and things being sent up the middle?
Yeah, I think it's multiple things. Certainly you have to have the right protections, right? And that starts from the offense coordinator, the quarterback coach, the offensive line coach, and it's a it's a peer-to-peer mentality, right? It's like, we're both in this together. As a coach, I can watch film for hours and hours, and I can watch this team of what Brian Flores does, and I can get us in the best rules potentially possible. But if my guys don't believe that they can execute it, or the call doesn't make sense for them, like, it doesn't matter. So it has to be a communication on the coaches and the players at the same time. It also comes from the trust, right? The offensive line coach has to trust that the five of us, no matter what, and you can always play armchair quarterback on Monday and look back at the film and say, well, he should have been in this call, this call, this call. But those guys are out there doing it live. So I think it's the belief that the players have in the offensive line coach and the rest of the coaches to go out there, execute the call, play fast. We're going to make mistakes, but as long as we're all wrong, we're all right, right? I think that's the key to any offensive line playing well. And it's also the belief that you bring five guys together in April, and you have real conversations, you have real meaningful, discussions of who we are. You build a room that way in April, and you start seeing the dividends of that paying off in August, September, October, November, December, when these guys are playing 5-1, right? And even though there could be injuries here or there, guys might miss a game here or there. Like you protect the sanctity of the room, and that's how you protect the sanctity of the pocket. So that's kind of, I guess, in a little bit of way, that's kind of a corny finish to that answer. But that's how it is, man. That's how we did it in Indy, and that's how you look at great offensive lines around the league. That's how.
Yeah, I think one of the main points that Ryan Kelly and Will Fries, when he talked later, they were making was about the chemistry along the offensive line. And this is a unique dynamic. We very rarely see two free agents from the same team just go and join another team together. But in the chemistry aspect, that's going to be a big help, I think, for those two to come here. And, Steve says, wish you could trade for Quentin Nelson. Just take all of Indianapolis's offensive linemen and bring them to Minnesota, pair them with the tackles, and they'll be good to go. But I think what you really sense from Ryan Kelly, and he's communicating to me about answering the question, is what a great communicator he is. And that is one of the biggest things that frustrated me last year about the interior of the offensive line was it seemed like there were far too many times where they were not on the same page. And it got better when Dalton Reisner came in, but when Ed Ingram was there was mental errors. There was, oh wait, was that supposed to be your guy? Was that supposed to be your guy? I mean, it just seems like they were having trouble with a lot of the blitzes and the stunts and things that people threw at them. And last year, the Vikings faced more stunts than anybody in the NFL. And I think part of this is because they were throwing the ball down the field. They are a pass first offense, so teams know that they could dial it up. But the other part is too that teams attack weaknesses. They don't attack strengths. So if you're looking for how can we get our edge rusher away from Christian Darrisaw? How can we get our edge rusher away from Brian O'Neill? Well, how are they going to do it? They're going to swing those guys into the middle. They're going to run those stunts. They're going to run blitzes and stuff like that to try to attack the interior of the offensive line, which means you've got to pick apart a lot of it. And that's where Ryan Kelly, I think, will be huge for the Vikings, is being able to help them set their protections, help them get into the right looks, and then communicate what they need to do. And he's already worked with his right guard for a long time. So that could be good. Kumar, yeah. Kelly also said that he had played for 14 different quarterbacks. Like, man, is that true? It probably is true. That he has played with a million different quarterbacks, a lot of different styles, a lot of different talents, levels of experience. So him stepping in with JJ McCarthy, that seems like it's going to be a really good fit. So I want to bring you two more from Jonathan Allen. I asked him about the scheme and how different it might be, because Jonathan Allen was coming from a scheme with Dan Quinn that plays the 4-3. It's not a 3-4 base, but I mean, we've talked about this a number of times, how nobody really plays like the old school 3-4, Greg Lloyd and Levon Kirkland and those, Dick LeBeau Pittsburgh Steelers, but it has its base in that. And so it's a little bit different when it comes to, sending like different or lining up different people at different places and things like that. Making it more of a defensive end than a defensive tackle type of position, stuff like that. So, let's hear from him on that. Here's Jonathan Allen on how he's going to fit into Brian Flores' scheme. Jonathan, I'm curious about how different schematically you think it might be. Maybe, you haven't had time to dive fully in to that, but just going from working with Dan now to Brian Flores, how creative Flores can be. Like, what have you seen schematically and where do you feel like you fit in?
Yeah, no, when you look at a guy like Coach Flores, man, they refer to him as a mad scientist. I mean, some games will be in a 3-4, bringing pressure off both ends, and some games we're switching it up. So, every week being in that playbook is a big key. But I really like how he's able to create space on the inside and allow, guys to get one-on-ones. And when you get a one-on-one in this NFL, you got to be able to win those. So I'm looking forward to just fitting right in and, doing what I can to help out.
Of course, if I was built like Jonathan Allen, I would also mostly focus on my shoulders and chest on the video. He was a little more body than face in the in our conversation, but He is extremely jacked. So he was another one where I asked him just about why he joined the Vikings. And he had a really interesting answer. It was quite a process for him to come to the conclusion that he wanted to join the Vikings. I'm just curious. It seems like the process came together pretty quickly for you joining the Vikings. Just what was that like for you, the kind of whirlwind, and what made the Vikings such an attractive location for you?
Yeah, so once I was told by the Commanders that I wasn't going to be re-signed, me and my agent put together a list of 5 things that were important to a city. How great everything was for the wives, for the players' families, obviously salary cap, team success, scheme, coaches, and honestly, culture. I think to have a good team and compete in the next level, you got to have a good culture. And at the very top of that list was the Minnesota Vikings. So once I found out that there was a mutual interest there, I mean, I told my agent Blake that, unless something unforeseen happens, let's go all in, let's go for it. And, I always like to say if you have 2 people who are level-headed and want to accomplish the same thing, you'll get a deal done. So, we were able to get something done relatively fast and get this whole process over with so we can get started on the next chapter.
So all of those interviews, you could see them, Vikings.com, they posted them, or on the Vikings Twitter, they stream them live. And Ryan Kelly's and Jonathan Allen specifically, I would say, are a must watch for Vikings fans because they were both delightful. But yeah, it's funny about, Go Wolves mentions the NFLPA report cards. And I also did ask Ryan Kelly about that. He gave a great answer. They came up with every single free agent. They came up with Javon Hargrave, and they came up with Isaiah Rodgers even brought it up. Everybody has taken notice of what the Minnesota Vikings have created as far as a culture. And it really speaks to both sides of the things they were looking to accomplish when they hired Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell, where Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's big picture plan for the Minnesota Vikings was to competitively rebuild, have a couple of seasons where they compete, but slowly take apart the roster and rebuild it around a rookie quarterback. And that's exactly what they've done. They have drafted their quarterback at JJ McCarthy. They've spent all the money in these guys. And here you are with some veteran star players that are going to surround the young kid, which has been a pretty common thing to succeed in the NFL. And the example that I like maybe the most is Jared Goff. His first year was a total disaster with Jeff Fisher and all that. He didn't even start the first half of the season. It was a wreck. Case Keenum was playing. So it was a throwaway year for Jared Goff. He was horrendous. And then they brought in Sean McVay. They changed the culture. They got a bunch of free agents. They went and got Andrew Whitworth, who is one of the best left tackles ever, Sammy Watkins, Robert Woods. Like, they got all these players. And then Jared Goff in his second year is leading an elite offense, even though he was not the Jared Goff that we see now. And there was all this criticism for him. Well, McVay's in his headset and they're making it easy on him. And it's like the guy's only a second year quarterback and he's got his team competing because they were able to execute that same sort of plan. And then Brock Purdy in San Francisco is like the all-timer of the 7th round draft pick who comes in and he seems to understand where to go with the football. And there's guys open all the time and they got a good running game and they got a good defense and everything around him. It's exactly what the Vikings are trying to do with this group, but it's very hard to execute it if you can't get the players to agree to come play for you. And money is a thing, but with the salary cap going up, a lot of people have money. There are a lot of teams that would have offered Jonathan Allen money to come play for their football team and Ryan Kelly money to come play for their football team. With the need for interior pressure and interior blocking, I'm sure that those guys both got a dozen phone calls and offers to come go to other teams. And it seems like one of the main reasons that they came to the Vikings was because of what they saw from Kevin O'Connell. So it's had to work in conjunction with the vision to actually build it this way, but also the head coach to create this environment and to win enough and to have, like, sometimes it's funny, those little things like the features on Cam Bynum and his dances and stuff like that. It's or even lifting up Sam Darnold on their shoulders. I know everybody made fun of that after it fell apart, but just signs of the camaraderie from the outside. And then these guys will ask their friends, hey, what's it like to play there? And it matters that this is what it's like to play here now. I think 4 or 5 years ago, if they had asked somebody inside the building, I think it was Ryan Kelly who said he knew Jordan Hicks. Hey, what's it like to play there? No, go sign somewhere else. The culture's a mess here. It's a disaster. Everybody's going to get fired. Like, that's what it would have been like just a couple years ago in 2021. And now here we are a few years later, and guys who have been stars in the league over the last decade, like Kelly and Allen, they're signing here. Isaiah Rodgers was an interesting one because he was suspended for a year with the gambling issue. And of course, and we asked him about what he took away from that year. And he said he kind of realized that the NFL moves on without you, that like it or not, even if you're out of the league, nobody's going to wait for you. And so he did a lot of self-reflection during that time, came back and played really well with the Philadelphia Eagles and took advantage of his situation there. So the Eagles took their kind of risk on Rodgers, and he proved that he could still be a contributing player. And I'm interested to see where he fits in, because the contract was not nothing, but it certainly wasn't, hey, you're definitely a starter. It might end up being kind of that Shaq Griffin type of role where he's rotating in, or they might draft somebody and there might be a big competition at cornerback. But that was interesting to hear him talk just about being away from the game, having it take away from you, and how much that matters to him. And as far as Will Fries goes, it sounded to me like, and if someone had a different interpretation, you could tell me, that Will Fries was essentially saying, if I had to play football today with his recovery from his broken leg, he couldn't do it. But the expectation is that he's going to be on track to be ready to go. And I think, I don't know if he said this, but it sounded like ready to go when the time comes, maybe training camp, with his recovery, that he'll be back to 100%. Now, everybody who gets signed to a big contract that had an injury is going to say, what injury? I don't even know what you're talking about. But Jonathan Allen did tell us that last year when he tore his pec, that, and you remember when this happened to Anthony Barr, they thought he was going to be out for the year. They thought it was a devastating injury, and it turned out it wasn't as bad as it had appeared originally. And he ended up coming back and playing in the playoffs for Washington. So I assume that he is good to go there, and that that's not something that's going to be a concern. So that was a main discussion. And I also learned that Jordan Mason is a man of few words, maybe along the Marshawn Lynch type of running back, where his main thing is running through someone's face. And that's really what he plans to do here. And he seemed like an earnest kid who maybe didn't do that many press conferences before. And that was his main focus, was, I would like the football and I would like to run through people. And I think he's going to do that. So, all right, let's get to your questions, and have a good discussion here for a bit. And then we can have Clay's Corner's got some things prepared for fun discussion as well. We'll start off with Anthony with JJ. We are a Gray Zabel away from the Super Bowl conversation. Well, that is aggressive, Anthony. But I think when you look at the roster that they're able to put around JJ McCarthy, what they've done for him is everything that they could. There is still maybe another wide receiver out there in the draft that they could get, or another free agent. And certainly you're talking about left guard is where Gray Zabel would fit in if they draft him with the 24th pick, or if they trade down and pick him. And left guard has to be high in the discussion of where they should spend one of their top draft picks. Now, a rookie guard is unlikely to come in and completely change the face of your offensive line. Usually there is some development process. Even the really excellent guards went through that. So I don't know if you're a Gray Zabel away from the Super Bowl conversation, but what you are is in the discussion for the strongest roster in the NFC. And there's only two teams that I would put clearly ahead of the Minnesota Vikings. And there are others that are arguably close. I mean, the Rams are close, if not dead even. The Packers are not a million miles away from them. Washington is certainly not a million miles away from the Vikings either. I would put them quite close as well. But really, only Detroit and Philadelphia are decidedly better rosters, more complete overall, built over years, lots of guys in their prime. But the Vikings aren't that far away from that. What it's really going to rest on is two things. Number one is their regression when it comes to their health luck. Because last year, I mean, very few people got hurt. Darisaw did get injured, and that was really tough for them. Excuse me. It was really tough for them, especially in the playoffs where it got them and week 18 where it got them. But as far as the rest of the roster, I mean, getting 1,000 snaps out of Van Ginkel, 1,000 snaps out of Grenard, Blake Cashman missed a couple games, was largely healthy. Same with Stephon Gilmore. Like, they had really good overall luck. The wide receivers were mostly healthy other than Jordan Addison getting banged up. Hawkinson was out for half the year, so that hurt, but they were one of the healthier teams in the NFL. So does regression hit you? They also took the ball away from other teams like crazy last year. They were at the top of the NFL in takeaways. That's a hard thing to repeat, especially if you play better quarterbacks this year like they will. So how much does that regression hit them? They were also at the top of the league in sacks. So if you're up there and didn't get hurt, got a ton of sacks, got a ton of takeaways, those from year to year where they're trying to fight that regression is by getting Jonathan Allen, by getting Javon Hargrave. Like, this is how you fight back against that as you get better, right? You say, we've got to be better than we were last year to have the same results, because there is going to be just some natural, can't keep taking the ball away at that level of a clip. So they have to reduce the amount of yards that they give up. And there were a lot of games where they gave up yards and teams moved the football on them. So I assume that that's kind of part of the discussion of, well, why do you go out and spend this much on two defensive tackles? Because if you play it the same way again, you're not going to have the AFC South there to give you 4 free wins essentially last year. It's going to be harder. So they seem to understand that concept. But then it's really just, how ready is JJ McCarthy? Because we know that the Vikings have the weapons, they've improved the line, they've got the coaching, they've certainly got the defense, and it's not a crazy thing to set that bar at top 5 or better, even if they are playing a lot of great quarterbacks. Like, they should be, if you're a Breaking Bad fan, they should be the one who knocks, right? They're the ones that should be scary as a defense, as opposed to, well, we're, facing a really good quarterback this week. It should be, well, the Vikings defense is making life hell on everybody. That's what they've done the last 2 years without as complete a roster as they have right now. So how ready is JJ McCarthy to lead a team into the playoffs and deep? And if JJ McCarthy is as good as Bo Nix was last year or better, or as good as CJ Stroud was as a rookie, I mean, that puts you at a really high clip. But if he's ready to be, or even what I was talking about with Jared Goff, that level where there's growing pains and there's a lot of work that the coaching staff has to do, but keep the ball on the fairway for the early part of the season. Jaden Daniels was running a lot of screens and short stuff the first part of the season, and then the playbook opened up and opened up. Heck, even Sam Darnold, we saw that last year. They were running kind of Shanahan, Kubiakian type of run first down and then play action off it early. And it wasn't until later in the season that you saw KOC open it up a bit for Sam Darnold. So is that going to be the case for JJ McCarthy? And if he is ready enough, then they can make the playoffs and they can be a contender. They can go into the postseason with everyone saying, like, hey, you might want to watch out for them because they have a deep roster. Someone else asked me another question today about, like, what's a successful season for JJ McCarthy? Like, where to set the bar? If we now think we could take a deep breath and say, okay, JJ's your quarterback, like, where do we set the bar? And the playoffs has to be the beginning of the conversation. If you miss the playoffs, it's not good enough. Like, you can't come off a 14-win season, turn it over to your quarterback who you've had a year with, and then go 7-10 and have everyone say, yay, great job. Like, I'm not saying move the franchise to, St. Louis. I'm just saying that, like, that's not a success. If you win as many games with half a season of Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins as with your first round quarterback, that would not be a success. But if they are in the 9-8, 10-7, or even better than that conversation, I think we'll just know with JJ McCarthy that we'll all watch every single game. I'll be there at them, and we'll be talking to people, and we'll be watching every moment of every throw and every interaction and all those things and how he deals with adversity throughout a season. And we'll get to the end of the year and go, yep, he's got it. Or, you know what? I got some questions. It's going to be one way or the other. And of course, there's another scenario where you're going, uh-oh. But at least the most likely scenarios to me, based on what we've seen so far from JJ McCarthy, are either I've still got some questions or, yep, it's happening. He's got it. And that's something that's going to be a little more based on feel than it is statistics. Because if he throws, I don't know, 26 touchdowns and 14 picks and averages 7.5 yards per attempt, like, what does that really tell you about how it looked? Or if he doesn't come through on a couple of last second drives, but has really good performances, like, that might be losses, but we're saying, he was really good in the game. Or if he has some struggle games and comes through in some clutch moments, and you might say, well, look, he's at least showing himself there. So it's going to be, I think, a moving target and a difficult thing to really pin down. But I also don't think there's going to be a massive debate when all of us, all you guys, myself, everybody in media, when we all watch the same games and gather the same information about a quarterback, you usually have a really great sense for him. And I'll give you a example. I like this story because I wrote an article off of it at one point. So I was in Cincinnati in 2021 for the Vikings. Was it opener against the Cincinnati Bengals? I think it was. And before that game, we talked to Mike Zimmer about Joe Burrow. And Mike said, and remember, Joe Burrow had like a half a season. They were terrible, didn't have great statistics. It was just okay. And Mike was like, no, I love Joe Burrow. I think he's going to be awesome. And we're like, really? Oh, okay. That's interesting. And then when I flew to Cincinnati, anybody who's been there, you fly into Kentucky and you got to take a really long Uber drive. And so everywhere you go, you kind of got to take Ubers. And I was in, I don't know, 4 or 5 Ubers over that weekend. And I'm not even kidding you. At least 3 or 4 Uber drivers were telling me, we think Burrow's going to be great. We think Burrow's going to be awesome. And I was like, whoa, okay. I mean, I guess like I hadn't seen more than one game from him the previous year, but the locals and Mike Zimmer, who had studied the tape, and everybody who really watched it saw it there, even though it didn't succeed in his first year. So I think of the same kind of thing as this went on in Buffalo with my friends there with Josh Allen, where you just got that sense like the guy's got it. It's just that next step. And if he takes it, it's going to be really serious. I think if you get to that point, it's a success. And anything beyond that point is a massive success for JJ McCarthy. So how about that for one question from Anthony about Gray Zabel? Maverick says best player available in the draft. This is why I now really love the draft conversation about the Vikings, because I mean, they really can go in a lot of different directions. They really can look at other positions that we normally would have thrown out and said, no, they've got to get this. You can't go with that. But now it's all right. If it's Malachi Starks as a safety, okay. There's a very few things that they could do in this draft where I would be like, what the heck were they thinking with that pick? I remember that happened. It's only happened a couple times because normally we could predict down to a T who they were going to take. And that is, last year, and there's been years in the past. I mean, you could pretty easily figure out, well, they're desperate for a center, so I guess they're going to take him, or a lineman in 2019, right? They need a tight end because Kyle Rudolph's contract is up. I guess they're going to take one and not pick AJ Brown or whatever. So there's been a lot of that throughout the years. This is one of the first years that I can remember going into it with, I'm not really sure, because I can justify so many different positions. And unless they do some insane trade, I can't think of a scenario. I guess if they took a Omarion Hampton in the first round after just trading for Jordan Mason, that would be weird. If they took a quarterback, that would be weird. But aside from that, there's not too much offensive tackle, we'll just assume they're going to be a guard. If they took an edge rusher, now that would be pretty weird because of Van Ginkel and Grenard and Dallas Turner. So I don't expect that. Linebacker would be a big surprise. Everything else is pretty much on the table, and they do have an opportunity to just take the best player that they can find. I mean, that is a rare position that they have been in. Aaron says, Jordan Mason, a man of few words, but that's not why they signed him. Exactly. He made that quite clear. And he was not, I thought Jordan Mason was not like being Marshawn Lynch. I'm just here so I don't get fined. I think it's just, there are some guys who are not big talkers and they're not in big talking positions. Like if you're going to be a center, I've never met a center who was quiet. You can't be, you have to talk all the time. But Jordan Mason seemed to me to be a very straightforward guy. Like, I'm going to get the ball and I'm going to run over people. And again, we just discussed it with Ryan Kelly, where a little bit of edge, a little bit of toughness is kind of what they needed. I didn't think last year was a soft team. That got thrown out sometimes. And I get why, because you got run over by an amazing Rams defensive line. I think that was talent based. I don't think that Cam Robinson is a great left tackle. I don't think that Garrett Bradbury has ever been a good pass blocker. I don't think that he's soft because of it. I think he's just not big. And it was never really his thing to sit there for 3 seconds, 3.5 seconds, and just straight up block the best players in the league. Blake Brandel was clearly exhausted by the end of the season, having never played 17 games before and then playing next to Cam Robinson. I mean, I think it was more stuff like that where, I mean, Dalton Reiser's not soft. He's just not built to be a good run blocker. He doesn't have explosiveness. He's also, and this gets like really in the weeds, but sort of cut high is what they call it, where the guy has long legs. And usually you want your guards, and this is just really silly, but it's also true. You want your guards to kind of have shorter legs and get the pad level going. Football, he just doesn't have that. Like it's not soft. It's just, they just don't have the guys to do some of this stuff. Who is going to run through a, what face like Marshawn Lynch? That's not Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is a small man. He's not soft and he breaks tackles by being elusive, but he's not just like him versus a linebacker, man on man. I'm just going to plow through you. That's more of Jordan Mason. So they have brought a lot of that to the table this offseason, and it seems intentional that they have gone out of their way to find players like that. Aviation MKF says, have we talked about Will Fries yet? No, I have not. We didn't grab clips from too many clips from Will Fries, but I mean, really his press conference was pretty straightforward. I think the main thing was that Will Fries, it seems like, is going to be on track to be good in terms of health. And the other thing he talked about that stood out was his relationship with Ryan Kelly, which I kind of talked about with Ryan Kelly. But it seems like Ryan Kelly was really, really important to Will Fries. He said, I love that guy. When I came in, he was willing to mentor me and bring me along. And then he sees where Ryan Kelly signs and wants to sign here as well. I think people like Ryan Kelly, and I felt this way about Aaron Jones last year and maybe Patrick Peterson in the past. There are certain people who everybody around them are better because they're around that person. And that's what Will Fries was saying about Ryan Kelly. And you just get that vibe from him right away when I play some of those clips of like the leadership capabilities that he has. And I think of that as being real leadership. It's not just, hey guys, let's go football. Like sometimes it is, but for the most part, it's, do you make everybody around you better? And that stood out a lot from Will Fries. And he also seemed very happy to be here. There's also that. But yeah, I mean, I didn't want to like play every single clip from the press conference. Just those are worth checking out, though, the other ones at Vikings.com. But yeah, I mean, I think that Will Fries and Ryan Kelly having that chemistry together to bring here is really important for them to jump right in and be a good duo on that right side. And then we'll see what they do on the left. A lot of you have asked, well, could they keep Brandel? And I think they could. Yeah. If they keep Brandel on the left side, it's not like, oh no, they're screwed. But he did give up the third most sacks in the NFL for guards last year. He did give up top 5 in pressures allowed. And I know there's the reasons, but you also, guys get hurt all the time. You can't have one guy go down and then you just turn into a well below average player. That's kind of a replacement level average guy. I think Blake Brandel is clearly an NFL player. He can clearly start in the NFL. But if you're talking about, do you want to have a difference making offensive line? That is the goal. It's not just how many teams in the NFL are just surviving on the line. Like just get enough meat up there to make sure our quarterback doesn't die and he'll do the rest. That's what, 20 teams? How many teams have an offensive line where the other team in their preparation is going, oh man, these guys, they know what they're doing up there. So you want to be that. You want to be the team whose offensive line strikes a little bit of fear into a defense. I'm not sure you're completely there with Blake Brandel, though I'm not saying he can't play. He can play. But if you can draft an upgrade and have a competition, I think it's worthy of a competition when someone ranks in the top 5 in pressures and sacks allowed for last year. Son of a Beavers, Vikings could go sign Desmond Ridder and then have both Rondale Moore and him because they were traded for one another. That's funny. Yeah, Desmond Ridder is just not caught on in any way. It actually is kind of shocking that Desmond Ridder started in the NFL when he couldn't even really be a backup. Wasn't it Arizona? He was there and they let him go. And that was a huge miss by Atlanta. And that was also when they were talking about or sending out, we've been discussing information. Didn't they send out something to some reporters that they weren't going to make any offer for Lamar Jackson and they've been roasted every single day since then? Brian says, so where are we exactly? We know what the potential is. What is the true, I assume you mean expectations. We have been in kind of flux before and it didn't end well. Yeah, I don't think that this is in flux. I think that this is in a very clear direction and expectations are going to be high. But everyone rationally understands that when you have a quarterback this young and inexperienced, that there's going to be moments of down and frustration. Like even think about Washington. The best ideal performance is what happened with Washington last year, right? Which is a veteran team around a young quarterback and they come together at the end and then they win some great games at the end and they get into the playoffs. They show their potential for the future. They get to the NFC Championship. It's a great season. The fan base is crazy through the roof, excited about Jaden Daniels. Like that's the best case scenario for the Vikings with JJ McCarthy. It's of course not impossible to make the Super Bowl, but I think when we talk about this team, we don't quite put it that high just yet. We're going to have to see some more first, but when it comes to the young quarterback and not being in flux is really the key, because then you could try to keep as much of the team together year over year around your guy. You could continue to build on it and who's going to be there. And you're not constantly having this discussion of, well, should they get Aaron Rodgers or bring back Kirk or Darnold or what? It's like, have your guy. That's what you're really looking for. But in terms of like what the expectations are, I'm setting them at, if they're playing their best football toward the end of the season and they're going into the playoffs and they're dangerous, then that's what you were looking for, is that another team does not want to play you because they're like, yeah, they're only 10-7, but have you seen their last couple games? And Jaden Daniels, he went through a dip. How about that one game from Bo Nix where he threw for like 20 yards? I mean, these things are going to happen. There's going to be some games. There's going to be some times where it's just not going to be pretty. And you're going to walk out of the stadium and go, what the heck was that today? Probably. I mean, that's just life with an inexperienced quarterback most of the time. I suppose it could be like Brock Purdy and how successful he was. And I guess I also thought that last year with Sam Darnold. I probably told you guys the same thing last year. Like, well, expect to have some serious roller coaster. And it was only a little roller coaster until the end when the roller coaster crashed and burned. But aside from that, point just being that that's where I would set the bar for them, is be in the playoffs and be dangerous in your first year with your young quarterback. And you're going to feel really good about where you're at. And the high end of that's happened over the years has been really good with some other young quarterbacks. Kumar says, is holding off signing backup quarterback just for comp picks really worth it? Depends on the market. I don't know that that's what they're doing, but it depends on the market for those quarterbacks. If everybody is holding off till May 1st, where I believe that's the comp pick deadline, then, I guess you just wait till then. I mean, you're not losing out on anybody. I don't know the formula with Cam Robinson. They might have been waiting for Cam Robinson and then trying to figure out how they would have to structure a contract. Like, they have this on a spreadsheet inside TCO Performance Center. They have not given me the spreadsheet, so I don't know how much they're doing that. Like, whether they're actually waiting for a backup quarterback for comp pick reasons or not. Backup quarterbacks are expensive. So if you're paying, and I meant, one of you mentions a fourth rounder. Well, it's not a fourth rounder. You're not paying enough money to have a fourth round comp pick for Joe Flacco. I promise you're not. It's going to be more like a sixth, which is what they would expect for Daniel Jones leaving, is something like a sixth. Now, these are small things in my mind. You get a sixth, a seventh. Okay. Stacy Coley or something, but right. That's a deep cut for you. Brian Cole, the guy that they drafted and then didn't make it through training camp, I think in the 6th round. So a lot of times those picks don't work out. It's not the biggest deal in the world. If you need a player, you should get him and you should just sign him when you need to get him and not worry too much about that. But if everybody is kind of stalled out in this market, then it's fine if you wait. Or if they have the formula and they were just waiting for the dollar figure on Cam Robinson to say, all right, we actually do have to wait, or actually, no, we don't have to wait. That might be part of it for sure. Let me remind all of you, and I'll get back to your questions here. I spent so long on one question that I have to catch up a little more rapid fire for you. And intern Clay, he's got his bedtime and everything, these kids. So, but I do have to remind you that this show has at least some sponsors always willing to take more. And one of them is called Tempo Meals. You guys know that I eat too much fast food, and I have been making an effort to get in a little better shape, eat a little bit better. And Tempo Meals is part of that. Tempo is a weekly delivery service that delivers chef-crafted meals from a dietitian-approved menu fresh to your door. They're perfectly portioned lunches and dinners. Take the guesswork out of eating well, and also fully formed meals that are a whole dinner or a whole lunch for you. Takes 3 minutes. How about that? Like, that's what's great for me, is the ease. Just throw it in that microwave, 3 minutes, good to go. My last order, I had Korean beef quesadilla, Tuscan butter shrimp, but there's so many options. If you're not big on meat, then they got lots of options for you as well. Took about 5 clicks to get that to my door. So if you want to give it a try, 60% off your first box. Go to tempomeals.com/purple insider. That is tempomeals.com/purple insider. Rules and restrictions may apply. All right, back to your questions. Jenna says, KOC has a creative mind for pass offense. Do you feel he has that same creativity in the run game? It is my fear that even strengthening the O-line and running back, he'll still be fixated on the passing game. Jenna, I guarantee you he will remain fixated on the passing game. That is absolutely going to be the case. However, what I think you're looking for in the run game is, if it's not the centerpiece, it will never be the centerpiece. That's okay. Passing is still more successful than running by an expected points added standpoint, like tenfold. It's way better to pass successfully than it is to run, even though the run game gained a lot of ground in efficiency over the last couple of seasons. So KOC's barking up the right tree by being a pass first type of offense. What you're looking for with the run game is, and this is what frustrated me last year, all right, it's 3rd and 2. Can you just give it to a guy and get a first down? It's 3rd and 2 at the goal. Can you just hand it off and get into the end zone? Can you have Jordan Mason run through someone, right? Can you have the offensive line and Will Fries, whose real thing is his aggressiveness? Can you have him just go after a dude? Will Fries said today that when he was in 4th grade, his dad put like chains on his back and made him do push-ups. That's a little crazy to me, but he's that kind of guy, right? He's the glass-eating offensive lineman who is supposed to get you the touchdown on that play, and they weren't able to do that. And the other thing is they got ahead in games, and it would be a 14-point lead, and they're throwing. And I think that was because they could not control the game on the ground. The creativity element's a great question, though, because I did feel last year that it did not have much of an identity. It did not have a lot of creativity, and it was predictable. When they were going to run, they ran so much on first down, how they were going to run, and some of that's O-line limitations. I think it can all improve, but I don't think it's ever going to be like, whoa, this is just like Gary Kubiak where Dalvin Cook's running for 1,600 yards or something. It's not going to be like that, but it just needs to be a problem for the other team. The other team's double teaming Justin Jefferson all day long. Like, think about that Bears game in Chicago. They were hysterically covering Justin Jefferson. Everybody on their team was covering him. And Aaron Jones had a great game that day. Like, every team is putting so much attention onto their passing game. Can you make them pay for it? You don't have to be the most creative. You don't have to be the most unpredictable. You just have to make the other team go, yeah, they might run 4 times in a row here and get 4 first downs on us. There was nobody who was afraid of that last year. LT Ranger says Rodgers has some good highlights as a sticky corner. You're going to have to say Isaiah Rodgers. It is funny, though, when they sent out the press release of like, here's when the guys are talking. It was like Rodgers at this time, like, oh, yeah, Isaiah Rodgers. That's right. Has some good highlights as a sticky corner, but was surprised to see he was a top kick returner in FBS 2019. Curious if Rodgers and Rondale Moore will be our kickoff returners. I'm curious if they kick return. Last year, it did not seem like they had any interest in kick or punt returning. Rondale Moore did it in 2021, and that was really it. He did it as a rookie, and he didn't do it before. Or I'm sorry, after. He didn't do it after that. It was just that one year. And he was just okay. Didn't have big numbers. Kevin O'Connell has not seemed like he really is in love with the kick and punt return game. But maybe if you have someone who's a difference maker there, he would fall in love with it. But they did in Kene Nwangwu. And they still didn't really use it when Nwangwu was there. And then they cut Nwangwu. And he didn't play much for the Jets. So maybe it was the right move to cut him. But the point just being that you had literally one of the best guys over the last couple years in terms of yards per return and touchdowns. And they just said, nah, I don't care about that. It feels like the only way that they're going to start to focus a lot on that kick return rather than just taking the touchback is if the NFL moves it. So it's more punitive to take a touchback. But as long as teams can kick off and give it to them at the 30 or whatever, it's going to be fine. Like they're just going to take the option there and not bother, because when you return kicks, you get holding penalties, you get fumbles. And I think he wants no part of the negative plays. Just give me the football. Let's get on offense. Let's throw it. I think that's how he looks at it, but I'll be interested to see if they increase that, if they get someone they like. Kumar says, will the run defense be as good or better with Allen and Hargrave? It probably will not be as good. Last year, Jonathan Bullard was tremendous at the run defense. He was one of the best run defending defensive tackles in the league. He did a great job. He was really strong, powerful, and they might bring him back. They might decide to sign him to like a 1-year contract and have him as a rotational player. They might also move Levi Drake Rodriguez or Jalen Redmond, who was very good against the run last year. He might have more opportunity, but these two guys, Hargrave and Allen, in their later stages of their career, at least by the numbers, have not been big, great run defenders. They've sort of stopped the run on the way to the quarterback, but also it might be schematic, because Hargrave in his career was a really good run defender and then became not later on, which might have just been, hey, go get the quarterback. Don't worry about stopping the run. We've got other people for that. So it might depend on just how they use them. And like, are both of them going to be in on first down? I think that Jonathan Allen will definitely be on first down. Is it going to be a 5-man type of front pretty often where Harrison Phillips, Hargrave, Allen, Van Ginkel, Grenard, they're all on the field at the same time? And it is more like a true 3-4, because I always kind of talk about, well, there's a lot of nickel in the league and you don't really see that 3-4. But how often will they do that? Will they do that for first downs where they got all those guys on the field? And then you're asking Cashman, you're asking Pace, who's a really good run defender. They might have to take on some more blocks. They might have to make some more plays. Even if those guys are the not great run defending versions, you already have Phillips who's quality at it. You have linebackers who are good at it. You have safeties who come downhill, corners who tackle. I'm willing to give up a couple more yards on the ground to get way more pressure. And I also think because Flores rotates like crazy, he'll have answers there. The daily question from Jason of why Kwesi Adofo-Mensah does not have an extension. When I find out, I'll let you know. I don't know any more than anybody else on that one. But I do know that they've been busy. There's been a lot going on. So if they didn't get it done by the NFL Combine, then they went right into this crazy whirlwind of signing players, doing all this stuff. They were I assume they were at the Senior Bowl, and then different workouts and negotiating contracts and introducing players and having like all this stuff, onboarding, bringing in families. And there's a lot to do as the general manager in the first week of free agency. Plus you got to have meetings about Aaron Rodgers apparently. So that would take up some time. If the general manager is not under contract when they draft, that's weird to me. That's weird to me. I can't think of that many examples around the league that I've heard of where a GM would be going into a lame duck year while drafting. That's just unique. So you would expect something to be done before then. I've also said it could be done already and they just didn't say anything. Like they don't have to. It's not like there's a law that the Vikings must put out a press conference saying Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has a new contract. He may have just signed it. I don't know. So that's always a possibility as well. The next opportunity there appears to be the owners' meetings is the next opportunity, which I will be attending along with several others in the local media, Alec Lewis, Kevin Seifert, Dane Mizutani. I assume Ben Gessling, he always goes, maybe a couple others, maybe Andrew Kramer. So we'll be down there, little contingent, and we'll talk to the owner. We usually do at the owners' meetings. And there's a sit-down breakfast with the local media and the head coach every year at the owners' meetings. So the question will be asked then, what's up with that? And we'll see if we can get some sort of answer for you. But, I don't know. I don't know as of right now. I mean, I also think that there's a lot of stuff that's happened in Vikings world that's been potentially weird or potentially crazy. Like, oh, could they trade Jefferson or could they bring back Kirk? That would be crazy. Or could they get Rodgers? That would be crazy. And so far, none of it's happened. Could they trade Jefferson for Malik Neighbors? So could they trade KOC? Like, none of it's happened. So I have tended to lean toward the not crazy thing is where this will go. And the not crazy thing would be that Kwesi just signs an extension and continues to be the GM. And I think at this moment, his rating as a GM publicly is about as high as you could look for in the entire National Football League, having drafted his future quarterback and filled up the roster the way he did. Howie Roseman is at the top of that list with an A+++, but not too far after that would be the way that Kwesi has handled everything here and the way that I should say the whole front office, the whole organization, led by him as the general manager. Ty to Skol says, specifically regarding our new free agent signings, who are you most intrigued to see in camp as far as what they can do? It's a good question because a lot of these guys have played so much football. It's like, well, I've seen Jonathan Allen. I've seen Javon Hargrave. I've seen Jordan Mason run. I think Jordan Mason in person is the most interesting to me. It's really, when you say intriguing, it's really the guys that are the lower level signings. It's really the Rondale Moore and the Jeff Okudah who become more intriguing because I think I know what the other guys can do. I've seen Jonathan Allen every time he plays the Vikings, just whacking their quarterback, or in the playoffs where he's going after Jared Goff. I've seen Javon Hargrave destroy the Vikings in the past. Okay, I know these guys could play. I'm interested to see Mason, but Mason is going to be a game guy. He's not going to be a practice guy. So that also has to be factored in. Rodgers, I don't know much about. Isaiah Rodgers, I don't know much about. So him and where he fits in, but it's probably Rondale Moore. And this guy is so explosive, so quick. The quick passing, the big playability potential from him. He's one of those reclamation projects that could fit in a very fascinating role for them. I would probably say him more than anybody else. I don't have the highest expectations for Okudah, but I do think more could be something. John says we need to stop trading picks and start using our picks to get top talent. You got to get younger, and younger is in capitals, so like way younger, like not even legally playing in the NFL younger. Is that when we use the capitals? No, my thoughts are, so here's the thing about the draft picks. The Vikings over the last 3 years have won how many football games? Is it let's see, 27, 34? 34 games. They've been in the playoffs twice. And a lot of the success has been, I shouldn't say a huge amount, but some of it has been because they've traded for people. Like TJ Hawkinson is definitely one of those people. And they've moved draft picks. Now, some of it is also moving up. And it was moving up to get Dallas Turner. And we don't know where that one's going to go yet. We're going to find out where that one's going to go. Next year, we might be saying, it's a pretty good idea they trade up for Dallas Turner. But they had to make the trade to get TJ Hawkinson, which I think we all agreed at the time was a good move. He's stayed on the team. He's signed an extension. He's a big player for their offense. But when you're in a winning mode, you go get a Cam Robinson with a trade. You go get a Cam Akers with a trade. You go get a TJ Hawkinson. Like a lot of these moves have been with the intent that they are a winning football team. And a lot of the fact that they don't have comp picks has come from, well, they had to sign free agents. So do you want to give Jonathan Grenard back? No. Van Ginkel? No. Cashman? No. Like you want those guys. So that's why they haven't had a lot of picks, is because they've been trying to win. I can't really blame them for that, but I also don't disagree at all with what you're saying. Like, yes, they do have to find, I think you can find a lot of complementary players in a lot of different places. And it's clear free agency is one of them. And the Vikings hack is that people want to be here. And you just heard that from these guys. They all specifically cited that NFLPA survey. That is a hack. That is an edge. Other teams don't have that. There's a lot of other teams that don't have that. So the Vikings can complement their superstars, their pillar players, I like to call them, with free agency. They've done it through undrafted free agency, where they find some intriguing players for the future. Bo Richter, Gabe Murphy, and then a starter in Ivan Pace Jr. And how do they do it? Well, they create the culture and they create opportunity. And Brian Flores is not judgy when it comes to where you were drafted. And agents want their guys to sign with the Vikings. So that's another edge. But that doesn't replace drafting guys with the first round and having them succeed. Like that, you're absolutely right that they need to drop back in this draft. They need to get more draft picks. They need to make sure that they are finding the next group of pillar players as well, or a corner who's going to be here a long time. A defensive tackle who's not just filling a spot for the next 2 seasons. Like these are things that they absolutely need for sure. Kumar is right. The squatty body. I was talking about Dalton Reisner and just, how he's shaped. You're looking for the squatty body. You're right. Maverick says if Harmon is available at 24, you bring the card ASAP. I like him as a guy you stay and pick. Yep, I agree. Because the thing about a defensive tackle is if you get a great one, they'll be on your team for 10 years. There are very few positions that you say that, but look how many hit the market. Almost nobody. The defensive tackles, they just don't hit the market. You get a great one, that guy will be good for you, and it's a very predictable position. Year in and year out, guys are the same dude. Like, look at Jonathan Allen's prime. Look at Javon Hargrave's prime. They're the same guy year in and year out. There's not these wild ups and downs. That's why I really love that position. And now that it's getting paid crazy money for guys with 500 snaps, you want to draft it. Andrew says, do you see Okudah and Moore making the 53-man roster? We are a long way away from having a good opinion on that. But if I were to guess right now, I'd probably say Moore does and Okudah doesn't. These long shot, this guy was a first round bust and they're bringing him in just for the heck of it. I just don't really ever buy those. And if one works out, it would be fantastic. but it's a hard thing to believe, where Rondale Moore has been good in the NFL before. Not great, but he's been good. Okudah has not been good in the NFL really at any point. Those are kind of long shots. So I think Moore will. Son of a Beavers, would Will Hernandez be an upgrade? You know on this show that if they get Will Hernandez, it's going to be like a big moment because he's been talked about so many times on this show and has not ever become a Minnesota Viking. He might be a guy, though. With the injury, you have to wonder where he is going to be. Like with the ACL, he's a little bit on the older side, so maybe that's part of the holdup, is not knowing where Will Hernandez is, or maybe people don't think he's as good as I think he is. I think he's good. I think he would be an upgrade at left guard. Chris says, love the content. I appreciate that, Chris. Says the pleasing thing about this offseason, the Vikings appear to be correcting mistakes of the past. I fully 100% agree with you, Chris. That is exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's why I was so irritated with the Rodgers stuff. Not just that Rodgers could be the quarterback, but we all have to fight over whose insider is their favorite insider and their most rightest insider. That's been annoying as well. But put that aside, and it's the stuff that I feel like I've been beating my head against the wall for so long about. Interior pressure. Remember, you guys who have listened for a long time, Courtney Cronin is a big part of this show, and she was on the other day, but used to be a even bigger part of the show each week. I don't know how many times her and I had that discussion. Like, how are you going to replace the Tom Johnson? How are you going to replace the Sheldon Richardson? And the answer was just not. And it was, well, what if we get Michael Pierce? And then he plays 250 snaps. And yeah, what if you get Delvin Tomlinson? Big fan of Delvin Tomlinson. Really good football player. And did get after the passer sometimes. But he's not like that guy. He's not that, it's third down. Jonathan Allen's one-on-one. Watch out. Because he's going to wreck your quarterback. Oh, the other team's guard is injured. They're playing a backup today. Javon Hargrave's going to murder this man in front of everyone. Like, that's what they've been missing. And getting it is something. Also, the running game has driven me to the point of madness over the last couple of years. Just after having seen it run so successfully with Gary Kubiak, it was just hard to watch these last couple of seasons where it was so unsuccessful. Brian says, we need to not care about the record this year. I don't care if they go 0-17 or 17-0. It's about JJ's development. Let me tell you, if they go 0-17, he didn't develop much. He didn't develop much if they went 0-17, man. It matters. It does matter. No, it does matter. And here's the thing for me. JJ McCarthy is not a rookie. You're going to hear that a lot. You're going to, it's really technically, no, it's not. It's not, because he had a full training camp. He had a preseason game. He had a full season behind the scenes. He worked with Kevin O'Connell every day. He watched Sam Darnold do this. He knows the playbook. He knows the technique. He knows the footwork. He knows the offense. He knows the players. You got to win. You can't go 14-3 and then go 7-10 if you let Sam Darnold walk out the door. We have to remember that too. I care about the record. The Wilfs care about the record. If you let Sam Darnold walk out the door, who just won 14 games for, and you win 5 games, that's bad. That's bad. And then if Darnold's in the playoffs, then everyone's going to be going, wait a minute. You let a 14-win quarterback walk out the door, right? Now, I think the process is fine. I was more on the side of bringing Darnold back than I think a lot of people, but I wasn't terrified of the Vikings doing that if they brought back Darnold for another year, if they were unsure about JJ McCarthy, which they're showing their cards a little by talking to Aaron Rodgers, are they not? That they're not, hey, this guy is the next Mahomes or something. And uncertainty drives football teams crazy, in part because they won 14 games. They want to get back to the playoffs. But if you're not in the playoff race at the last week of the season or getting into the playoffs, I think it's kind of a wreck for you. Like, that's where you have to be. We cannot treat this like it's a mulligan year. They just spent the most money in free agency on a bunch of guys who are 30 and injured. They better win. You're not paying your season tickets to show up at US Bank Stadium, and the Wilfs are not paying all these signing bonuses and everything to be like, oh, it's just a development year. That's not what they've done here. They have said, we're moving on from Sam Darnold to go to JJ McCarthy, who we believe can make us competitive. This is not an ownership either who says, oh, hey, it's just a development year. That's not how they treat it. So I totally disagree. I think the standard is high. I think if they lose, then they deserve a lot of criticism if they don't make the playoffs. But if they're in the playoffs and JJ McCarthy has played really well and they lose in the first round, it could still be a successful year. That's the point. It's not, if you don't win the Super Bowl, just send everybody out, and fire everybody. It's definitely not like that. So I think that's what you're getting at, but not with the money they spent and the veterans they have. These guys, Justin Jefferson is in his prime. Christian Darrisaw is in his prime. Jonathan Grenard's in his prime. You got to win. It's time to win. If you're going to let Darnold go, who just won a ton of games, you got to win. Wade says, I want a pie chart on which days of the week are the most annoying to hear about Aaron Rodgers. For me, it's 7 equal slices. That's very funny, Wade. That's very funny. And I agree with you. I'm tired. Yeah, I'm tired. This was an exhausting week. And then you feel like it's over, and then someone says, wait a minute, it's not. Like, okay. I don't know. Let it be over. Let it be over. Tristan says, isn't JJ officially a rookie? That I don't know. Some people have asked me that, like, can he win rookie of the year? I don't think so, but I don't know. I'm not sure. But he's not. That's the thing. He's not a rookie. Like, he had the experience of being in the NFL for a year. He didn't get to practice, I know, and patience is required for him starting for the first time. But it's not, hey, it's a rookie, who cares what happens? Like, that's not where this franchise is at. And if it is, and if he's that far away, then they have screwed something up. If he is so far away, which I don't think he is, I saw him last year, but if he's so far away from playing, then you messed up the timeline. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Like, this was when he was supposed to play, or the injury messed up the timeline. This is when he's supposed to play. And if you're not going to bring in Rodgers and you're not going to keep in Darnold, then I think it's fair to expect you to win. That's not a crazy thought. This team has done more or less nothing but winning since Kevin O'Connell got here. So it's not a crazy thought to set the bar pretty high at you should win with JJ McCarthy right away, or you shouldn't have let the other guy go that was winning. I think that's fair. All right. This has been fun. A lot of great comments, questions. You guys are having a good off season. I think you guys have even been fairly rational about the Rodgers stuff and not total maniacs in the comment section. So, but a lot of great questions, great comments, excitement. I've enjoyed it. Aside from the Rodgers stuff, I've had a really good time. Let's bring in intern Clay, presently at the University of Pennsylvania in a dorm room, not a jail cell as it might look from the background. Clay, you have put together your list of several things. You got a list of stuff, and you got questions and comments. You just keep adding more and more to Clay's Corner each week, which is very exciting. So how are you this evening?
Yeah, I'm good, and I'm excited to get into it. We've kind of moved past the headlines. We're kind of out of the news era of the season, so we're getting a little more creative, getting a little more we're using our imaginations a little more this time. So let's hop straight into it if you don't mind. The first one is actual news. We got the Lions are proposing 2 rule changes. The first one is that they want to eliminate automatic first downs for defensive holding and illegal contact. And then the second one, they want wild card teams with better records to be seeded higher than division champions who might have a lower record. So how do you feel about both of these proposals?
All right, the first one is so comically Lions because that's their defense, is just to grab people. And so they're like, hey, stop penalizing us. Although I will say, and you being a former wide receiver, you're probably very against this rule proposal. But doesn't it seem very harsh to give a first down? I mean, it's 4th and 16. Drops back, somebody grabs a guy on the way by, oops, automatic first down. It feels like it gives the referees too much power. And I would love the explanation for why that is, why it isn't just a 5-yard penalty. You could actually make it at the spot of the grab. Like, oh, well, he grabbed him 7 yards down the field, or he grabbed him 17 yards down the field. That's where the ball is going. To me, though, the grabbing happens so often, it gives the referee an opportunity to convert a first down for the other team whenever they want. And this isn't a football is rigged point. It just means like that is a huge play in the game potentially for something that was just a small grab. And this did affect the Super Bowl, where it was at the goal line. It was the Chiefs and the Eagles, and what was it, James Bradbury or whoever it was, reached out and grabbed, and there was an automatic first down. Chiefs win the game, kind of took the momentum right out of the end of that Super Bowl. So I'm against that one. But I'm for where they're going with that one. But I know why they're doing it. The other one, of course, they would change a rule for the Vikings like after something happened to them, because that's exactly what went down in 2009, where Favre didn't get a chance to touch the ball in overtime. The Saints kick a field goal. Then they changed the rule after that about giving each quarterback a chance with the football in overtime. I have never understood, and I respect an NFC North title. I definitely do. But I have never understood how someone could win 14 games, and theoretically someone with 7 wins could have been, someone with half as many wins could have hosted a playoff game. And look, the Rams could have played the Vikings on the moon and they would have beat them the way they were playing, but it's still not US Bank Stadium. You can't tell me the game goes exactly the same way. Sam Darnold was super comfortable in US Bank Stadium. He played great at US Bank Stadium. And then he goes on the road to Detroit and LA and comes apart. It's like, I think that there's a legitimate beef there. So actually both of these rules, I don't have a huge problem with that. Yeah, I guess Vike will win has a good point about like, there's no way to know what would have happened after the player. So maybe he was going to be wide open and they deserve a first down. Yeah, I understand that. You're right. I don't want to encourage more grabbing because it's not that bad. We want less grabbing. So, okay, fair enough. I'll take that one mostly back. But if you win 14 games, another team wins 15, another team wins 10, it should go 15, 14, 10 for your playoff seeding. And why it doesn't, I'll never really understand.
See, I'll start with the illegal contact and defensive holding. And you're right. The receiver in me is definitely not a fan of this. And I think it's because a lot of these penalties, they occur like down the field on plays that could potentially gain 20, 30, 40 yards. So if you could just hold him and get away with 5 yards and no first down, it's going to create, it's going to make the DBs want to commit these penalties more. And it'll just slow the game down. It'll get rid of big plays, and I'm not a fan of it. And I'm really not a fan of division winners not being rewarded a home playoff game. I completely understand, like, yes, my record's better. Like, that kind of shows that I am a better team than you, and I should be rewarded for it. But I don't know. I think there's just something special about being a division winner, and I don't want that to be diminished at all. And I think if you want home field advantage, I think you should take care of business and win your division.
How about wear a patch for the next year? We won our division. How is it not taking care of your business to win 14 games? I mean, that's pretty wild. I mean, R. Emmer says the fact that the Bucks were a higher seed than the Vikings, but also pick before us in the draft is shenanigans. I mean, that. Look, I'm not saying that an NFC North title is not worth it, but these extreme examples are pretty tough to defeat when you were a way better regular season team. And what the playoffs are supposed to do is reward you playing the best in the regular season. Put up a banner, celebrate an NFC North title, get little hats or something that people can buy, and then get the second seed in the playoffs. I just don't understand how you can be 4 games ahead of the Los Angeles Rams and then have to go play at essentially their place, like on the road.
Yeah, I could definitely see both ways. It's just how I like to hold on to the tradition and the impact of having division winners. So maybe that's just me being an old holding on to the past, but I can see the argument for both of them for sure.
Fair enough. You didn't even mention that the sorry Packers are afraid of the tush push, and they, that was out there before, but now I think it's official that they are the ones that are making that proposal. Feel free to stop it anytime. Do you have a take on that? I mean, I'm fine with it because you look at the Bills, they tried to do it. The Vikings tried to do it in 2023, and they had a slot wide receiver trying to push the tiny butt of Nick Mullins, and it just did not work at all. So it's sorry that they're good at it. I mean, if it's your team, sorry, Justin Jefferson's hard to stop. They should put a rule that he has to have ankle braces that weigh him down because he jumps too high. Like, come on now. If you got something that wins, you should be able to do it. And I haven't seen like a rash of injuries or anything else. I mean, they should make sure that they line up correctly. I feel like they're not exactly always doing that. But
yeah,
if you get something that wins, do it.
Yeah, Jason Kelsey revealed how you would like move the ball and stuff, and it's like, all right, that stuff is a little on the edge. But yeah, Packers need to just stop being soft. Just stop being soft. It's like you said, only one team is able to do it over and over again, and it's because they lift 1 million pounds and they squat 600 pounds. So it is what it is. Just be better. Mad because bad.
Taylor says that's why they replaced Powell with Rondale Moore. He's a better tush pusher. Yeah. He is a little more stout for the short guy. So, okay. What else you got?
All right. So for my next one, now that free agency is wrapping up, I think it's time to like fully shift our attention to the draft. So who are top 3 guys that you want the Vikings to target with their first round pick?
If I've got to pick just from 3, and we're not saying trade down, the names that I keep coming back to are Gray Zabel, the offensive lineman from NDSU. To me, putting a left guard in there who's young and can develop and is a great athlete and is kind of a vicious dude, along with the people that they just added, along with the pillars that they have at tackle, solidifies that offensive line, gives them some nastiness, locks in those guards long-term because Will Fries is on a 5-year contract, like locks them in for the years going forward. They just have not had that in forever. And in fact, how many teams have that at all? So I love that idea. The other guy that comes up constantly is Derek Harmon, defensive tackle from Oregon. It's fine to me if they just signed 2 guys at that position because they're both 30. They're not on long-term contracts. Develop him over a couple years, play him 400 snaps, and then let him loose and have somebody at that position for a long time. Now, Matt mentions Jahadi Barron. Before the combine, Jahadi Barron was on my list. The problem is he had an awesome combine. So now I don't know if they can get him. I feel like Jahadi Barron is going to be taken before him. So I'll give you a guy that has been on my radar for trade down is Trey Amos, who I think is a very good cornerback fit for the Vikings. But every time I do a draft sim or look at people's mock drafts, I mean, there's like 15 different players that you could talk me into and say, well, what about Calvin Banks if he drops, or what about Luther Burden, the wide receiver from Missouri? And I like that idea of getting another wide receiver for JJ McCarthy, as many weapons as you could possibly get. So there's a ton of different options for the Vikings at that position. Those are just 3 names I kind of keep coming back to. But the great part is every time we do a draft simulation, like, I can pick somebody different. And it actually makes sense. I don't seem like an idiot. Probably the best thing is trading back. But I think those couple of names keep coming up time and time again.
Yep. The Vikings have set themselves up to really just pick best player available. And I think this is not definitely. There's no definites in the draft, but Will Johnson and Jahadi Barron will likely not be there. But if they somehow slip, I think it's the easiest pick for them. I think pairing someone up with Byron Murphy would be awesome for them. I think corner and left guard are probably the biggest holes they have left. And I won't even say they're huge holes at the moment because of how talented this roster is. But I think the next pick, I know there's been a lot of controversy about Vikings picking safety early, but I like Malachi Starks as well. I think he's one of the best players in the draft, and the Vikings can't afford to look 2 to 3 years down the road. And Harrison Smith's not going to play forever. So it would be nice to have somebody that could be a rotation player this year and then kind of grow into that role. And then
Randall in the comments mentions like 8 guys, and all of them I'm like, yep. Yeah. Walter Nolan, yep. Kenneth Grant, the defensive tackle, a little less sold for me on it than a guy who is a pure pass rusher. I like the pass rusher more. I think it's harder to get after, but Hairston from Kentucky, the guy who ran like the 4.3, and Devontae Jackson, is that his name? Donovan Jackson, Devontae.
Oh, yeah,
Donovan,
I think.
Donovan, yeah, okay. Donovan Jackson, the offensive lineman from Ohio State, who had a really great workout. Darius Alexander, who I've mentioned on the show before, getting after the quarterback. Javon Ravel, the cornerback from East Carolina. Melchi Starks. Like, there's just a lot. And that's what makes it really fun to kind of go through each one of these scenarios. Let me throw a question back at you. So as we're leading up to this draft, a lot of times there's quarterbacks and then everybody argues over the quarterbacks. So it's like, oh, would you take Bo Nix? He's second round pick, or trade up for McCarthy, or, is Daniels or Drake May? How good is Caleb Williams going to be? And that is something that all of us, no matter how much you love the draft or don't pay attention to it at all, we can all have conversations about quarterbacks because we've all seen them or we've seen highlights of them, and you can form an opinion. This year, everyone is so bleh on Cam Ward. He's just a guy, and he might go at the top. Okay, good for him. Maybe he'll be good. We'll see. And they're trying to make Shedeur Sanders a debate topic. I'm not sure how much he is really in the NFL. I feel like he's going to drop to the back of the first or the second round, but I don't know. We'll see. They're trying to make him like a controversial figure. Who's interesting to you? Like, who are you like, ooh, I'm fascinated by this guy? Because I don't think this draft has a ton of those guys.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this guy, but not for the right reasons. Like Jalen Milroe, I kind of want to see just who gets stuck with him. I don't think he's going to be a great quarterback in the league. Obviously, he's a great athlete, but I think he's just so far away from what it takes to be an NFL passer. So I'm interested to see if anyone will jump up and take him early, or see if he actually like drops to probably where he should be. And then probably the only other guy is Jackson Dart. There's just been a lot of talk that he might be a first round guy now and stuff. And I don't know. I feel like all these quarterbacks, like you said, are pretty similar, and they're kind of just meh. But I don't know. I'm interested to see Jackson Dart, or if any of these teams will get super aggressive for a quarterback.
They're really trying to make Jackson Dart a thing. There was a couple of years ago where it was getting mocked occasionally in the first round, like Sam Howell, and he goes in the fifth. Malik Willis, he's going to be a top draft pick. There was a mock right before the draft on a major website that had him as the number 2 pick. He went in the third round. Desmond Ridder, a lot of the tape people. Oh man, Desmond Ridder. Last year, the one I made fun of the most was Spencer Rattler. Just could not believe that people were trying to claim that was a prospect, because the bar is so high for quarterbacks. I think that this is what some of the analysts miss, is that a team is not going to take a quarterback at the top unless they fully believe that guy could be their franchise quarterback. And even as desperation increases, they're still not going to do it unless they really, really believe. I mean, even teams last year, like the Giants clearly did not believe JJ McCarthy was going to be their franchise guy. Not saying they're smart, but they didn't. And they picked Malik Neighbors. If you're not 100% bought in, they're just going to let those guys slide down. And then usually they don't get drafted that often these days in even the second round. Like, we see them a lot of times slip to a total flyer, like a Malik Willis, like a Desmond Ridder in the third round. So I'm not even sure that there's going to be 2 guys taken in the first or even in the second, depending on what happens. But also you could see, someone getting desperate with Shedeur. I don't know. I was listening to a report today, and whoever it was talking about the Browns and Shedeur Sanders. The report was some people inside the Browns building like Shedeur Sanders, and but I'm not sure how much. Like, that was the report. Like, okay. Well, that sounds really locked in to Shedeur Sanders. Right?
We're bought in.
Right. Wow. I mean, print the jerseys, right? But that's how everything with him is. And him with his disposition, we'll call it. I saw a quote from him today saying like, oh, it's just haters or something. You're like, I don't know, man. I think we're going to have to start acting professionally if you're going to be a professional quarterback. I'm not sure that he's been doing that. If you're not sold on that guy being the face, these franchises are worth what did the Boston Celtics just sell for? 6? Well, what does that make an NFL franchise worth? $8 billion. You're not drafting a guy unless you think he could be not in the first round. Randall says Palazzolo comp for Jackson Dart is Mac Jones. Right on. Just doesn't have a high-end talents, and teams have gone with that. The Kenny Pickett, the Mac Jones, it's blown up in their face. That's just not that interesting. Travis Hunter, I'm intrigued by. And Ashton Genty. Is somebody going to go super high on Ashton Genty? That I would say I'm interested in. Aside from that, I don't know. Not a lot of guys that are really catching my eye.
Yeah, this Tyler Warren's kind of interesting to me because I've kind of see him being projected all over the place.
Yep.
Even Chicago, who I feel like are kind of set with Cole Kmet. Yeah, everybody could use a nice tight end too, but I don't know. I feel like there's just so many landing spots for him that are being thrown out there where I'm kind of intrigued to see where he goes, especially since he is like a cool player to watch. He kind of does it all. So,
right. And tight ends are tricky because sometimes they get projected really high and it either takes them a long time to be good or like Kyle Pitts. But they're another one of those positions I talk about sometimes with young players, positions that you have to play the guy. Tight end is that. If you draft him in the first round, like you got to play him, even if he's not ready or he's not good. There's other spots where if you're a corner and they draft you and you're not ready, they can kind of rotate you in and figure it out. Tight end is like an every single play type of thing. Warren, though, he could do a lot of different stuff. Maybe Brock Bowers inspired another high pick of someone you could just throw the football all the time. I'm usually against drafted tight ends high. I think they're available all the time. There's guys who are not even considered great who just sign with teams and are fine. I saw Tyler Conklin is just doing like a visit with the Chargers. He'll probably get $5 million or something. That guy can play. We saw him play here for the Vikings. So I think they're available pretty often. And it's really rare that you could get a high end one. And a lot of times it takes 3 or 4 years for the guy to even be really good. That was TJ Hawkinson. Took him 3 years to develop. And then the Vikings got him. It's like, well, thanks Lions for developing that guy. Sam Laporta is kind of an outlier. But yeah, I mean, there's a handful of guys that are intriguing, but I think the fact that the Vikings are so far back away from those guys that it's been more disconnected for me than maybe in years past if the Vikings were drafting higher.
Yeah, 100%. Tight ends are weird for me because I feel like they can be the most dominant, impactful position on the field, but there's only like 5 good ones in the league. So it's hard to really just bet on the next one. So it'll be interesting to see how things shake out.
Totally agree with that.
For my next question, the Vikings had a lot of moving pieces this offseason, and I kind of wanted to just play the what if game with you. What if the Vikings had spent their money differently? Like in an alternate universe, what moves could they have made that they didn't, and how could it have made this team be looked at differently?
Well, there's definitely an alternate universe where some guys who were franchise tagged or who were signed to extensions were not signed to extensions. So the Vikings name was thrown out there in Milton Williams conversation. And I think if Osa Odigizua from the Dallas Cowboys had not signed, then he would have been at the center of what they were looking for. A younger guy who has pressure rates similar to Jonathan Allen and similar to Javon Hargrave. And Milton Williams, I mean, that might have been somebody that they were the ones going, wait a minute, how much money did they put into that? I think the price was just too high for him. But if you were allocating your money a little bit differently, going for someone who could be there long-term could have been part of it rather than older players. I think that there's a world where rather than invest almost all of your money in guys who are in their 30s, proven, or in Will Fry's case, he's 27, Jordan Mason is 26, which is like being almost 30 in running back years. I know he doesn't have a lot of tread on the tires. I'm just saying, like, that's the position and the age curve. So they really went hard after guys who were very proven, that had sample sizes that were big outside of Jordan Mason, but even Isaiah Rodgers has played a lot of football in the NFL. And I think that for someone like Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, why he would like that is that they're more predictable. And for a coaching staff, why they would like that is because you can ask them to do more and they're not like swings at younger guys. So Asante Samuel Jr.'s name comes up from time to time. Like, oh, what about him? He's like 25. And we have seen them do that a little bit in the past, but for the most part, they have not this year gone after, hey, this is the 25-year-old free agent, like a Javon Holland or something. And they're going to, go forward with him for the next 5, 6, 7 years. It's really a lot of these are 2-year playing type guys. Ryan Kelly and Jonathan Allen are, if they give you more than 2 years, it's pretty surprising based on their age. And the same with Hargrave. That would be the alternate reality world part 1. The alternate reality world part 2 is pretty clear. That's Sam Darnold comes back. And then how many of these guys can they actually pick up? That would be the other one is, would they still have been able to do a lot of this stuff had they signed Sam Darnold to a 1-year, $40 million contract with 5 void years, and it would hurt them down the road with the cap? They could have, the way they scheduled out all the stuff, but it would have had implications down the road. I wonder about how everyone would have felt because I think the big fear about the Sam Darnold thing was that if they signed Darnold and brought him back, everyone wants to see McCarthy. They love McCarthy and all that stuff. But one of the biggest rational fears was that they wouldn't be able to do stuff in free agency. And then you look at the way that they scheduled out the salary cap hits and you go, well, actually, they could have. And then you would have been talking about, well, Darnold's coming back off a 14-win season with a way stronger team. I think that people would have eventually kind of come around to, well, if they're bringing back Darnold, that means they don't think McCarthy's ready. And also, look how much better they are than they were with Sam Darnold for 14 wins. So that's the other alternate reality, Vikings free agency.
Yeah, the biggest thing I look at is a lot of the decisions the Vikings made this decision were built off of their faith in J.J. McCarthy, it seems. Going out and getting older vets that are proven and you're going to get. It's because you think this young quarterback can step in and win now. And it just shows the confidence. And that's why the alternate reality of maybe the injury didn't heal as good as they want, or maybe they just didn't like what they saw as much. And maybe they really like Sam Darnold. So having Sam Darnold back, I feel like they definitely would have still been aggressive for the offensive linemen, but maybe I feel like a lot of the D-line moves might have been different just because of that $30-40 million contract. But another thing I think about too is the running back situation. It seems like they've decided to go with Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, 2 proven guys, instead of drafting one of these young guys in this big class. And I think it would have been interesting to see not only which one they take, but how they perform and how it works out. So, because I know we talked a lot about the Vikings run game and what they need to do to improve. So it's interesting to see them go the vet route instead of the young guy.
Well, and there's another one too, where Harrison Smith retires. And if Harrison Smith had retired, then do they have to go out and get Javon Holland, or do they have to go out and bring back, Cam Bynum at $15 million a year because they would know that Harrison Smith wasn't going to be there? I don't know if they were going to pay him $15 million no matter what, but maybe Trayvon Moehrig is a guy that they would have looked at, or a handful of other Justin Reed safeties that got paid big money. There are domino effects. I love your point about the backfield though. And I had penciled in, all right, every draft simulation, I better take a running back because they just need someone so desperately to pair with Aaron Jones. And essentially they spent a 6th round pick for next year to get this guy in Jordan Mason, which is a really good financial investment or draft pick investment with capital. But you could have been maybe looking at, taking Omarion Hampton in the 1st round, or, Travion Henderson in the 1st round. And then it's very different in the background or in the backfield. I mean, if they had let go Aaron Jones, that's a really good point. I think that a lot of these alternate universes though, they all sort of lead to the same place of the roster getting better and filling out some of these key places. It's just how they went about it. There were a few different options, and that might be a thing that we go back to. I actually like this topic because it might be something that we go back to as the season progresses and go, let's take a look at what they could have done, what they did, how that worked out. Like, should they have tried to put that extra few $1,000,000 on the table for Milton Williams as opposed to getting 2 older guys? Because I think he would have come here if you had met the price of the New England Patriots. Or, the Sam Darnold thing, I don't think anybody wants to have that conversation ever, I'm sure, but maybe we do, about what it would have looked like if Sam Darnold had come back. And that's the alternate reality. And then here's my hope, is that this reality stays alternate with Aaron Rodgers. We'll hope it stays. That is the only thing that's interesting about Rodgers, if it doesn't happen, is would they just have been doing it because it's him and he's one of the GOATs and like you just have to because it's him? Or would they have been doing it because they weren't really 100% sure on McCarthy? I tend to think it's the first one, but the second one leaves at least the door open to it, and the reports that they might have considered bringing back Sam Darnold. So at least for now, we go forth with JJ McCarthy. Let's get one or two more in here.
Yeah, well, just to close, all these are what ifs until, like, if JJ steps in and does what the team thinks he did, what he will do, these will stay as what ifs. They will only come back around if he struggles and
Yep.
the Vikings lose 8, 9, 10 games, and it's what happened here. So it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
It is crazy though when you think about it. You spend think about all the people who work for the Vikings, and they spend all this time building the roster, getting the cap right, doing the pro scouting, getting the undrafted free agents, the best ones they could possibly get for it. The scouts are out on the road 24/7. They're drafting guys, they're doing all this stuff. And really, it rests on one dude. Isn't that insane? And now they've done a hell of a lot to make it better for that dude and to set him up, which we know has, I think, the most correlation to success is what you have around you in the NFL. Kurt Warner was great with the Rams, then not great with the Giants, and then great again with the Cardinals. Weird because he just ended up getting Larry Fitzgerald there with Arizona and had Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt, right? And Brock Purdy, Mr. 7th round, Mr. Irrelevant. I think he's a good quarterback, but I don't think he's that good of MVP caliber with that group. So that's the plan. And I think the plan has done everything to move that needle is percentage chance he succeeds. Every quarterback, sometimes you'll see this. Well, 40% of quarterbacks who came into the NFL became good starters. And you're like, okay, but they're not all starting the race at the same point. Sam Darnold started his NFL race with crocodiles and moats and people shooting arrows at him and the worst people rooting him on, and Adam Gase, and Todd Bowles was not in a good position with that. They had some offensive coordinator that Bowles hired who was not really that qualified, and I don't even think has ever been in the NFL again. I mean, that's way different than starting your NFL career with, why don't we give you some training wheels and a jetpack, and we'll see how it's going to work out. So it is very much different between their starting points.
Yep. And then for my next question, or it's not really, I have a list of 5 players that I think are due for a breakout season, and I wanted to see if you agreed with me. Okay. And the first one on that list, I feel like had to be JJ McCarthy. Like you said, he's been given the jetpack and the training wheels and everything around him, but at the end of the day, it comes down to him and how he performs. So I think he has all the tools in his belt to be successful, and I think his mental game and his mentality is really what's going to set him apart. So yeah, I think he's bound to have a big year this year.
Can you call it a breakout season if he hasn't played yet? I'm gonna throw a flag on that one right off the bat. Like, when I think breakout season, I think a guy has been there and it's time for him to take his big step. So think about like last year, Jonathan Grenard. Like, he's good and he got paid like he was good, but whoa! I mean, Andrew Van Ginkel, he wasn't on a second team All Pro. Like, that's a breakout. But to your point about JJ McCarthy, what I feel about him right now, and we'll see, my opinion will change and will grow with OTAs and mini camps. And the more that I see and the more that I hear, it will grow. But where I stand right now is that what I saw last year was very impressive. The NFL is super, super hard on quarterbacks. It always has been, and it always will be. And that's what makes it so great. And until someone has done it, we can't really say. So I think he's got all the tools and I think he's got all the opportunity, but it really is one of those things where you just have to see it to really know. If I'm projecting him right now, I think he will have a good season. I think they will be in the playoffs. I think he will take advantage of all those things around him, but I don't know that. I mean, this league breaks people. So we'll see. We'll see. They've done everything they could. That's the one thing we can always say is that what they've done with this roster is enough to where if McCarthy can't succeed with it this year over the next couple of years, then he just wasn't a good pick and he wasn't a good quarterback and they can move on pretty quickly. You're not going to have this whole Darnold thing that he went through was like, is he really good? Is he really not that good? And I remember hearing from somebody in the league who told me like that going into last year, they're like, I think Sam Darnold's really good. And I'm like, really? They're like, yeah. I think like he's really talented and he can make plays and he's got a strong arm and he just needs the opportunity, and it ended up working out really well for him. So at least you'll have the answer based on what you've built around him. So that was way too much time on the first guy on your list. Let's talk about the 4 real breakout players that you've got on your list.
Man, rookies can break out too. All right. That's all
I guess they're breaking out of never playing.
Well, I looked at a lot of younger guys that are poised to take that next step, like Tyrone Tracy Jr. I think he and Malik Neighbors were the only real bright spots on that Giants offense last year. And I feel like he kind of made a name for himself, but he only started, I think, 10 or 11 games and had 9 games where he touched the ball 10 or more times. So he really wasn't that involved until later in the year, and he still ended up with 800 plus yards and 5 touchdowns. So I expect him to have an increased role and help ease the load on whoever comes in at quarterback.
So this would be like for the fantasy people. I think that's a great pick. Also, Randall is right that if you're going to pick a Viking, Dallas Turner is your Viking breakout player because he didn't play that well last year, just got into the mix. I'm sorry if he was already on your list, but that he could be that guy who's a first round pick that everyone went, oh, well, I don't know if he's going to be anything. And then suddenly it clicks. But Tyrone Tracy is a great pick. Is it just me, or do the Giants feel like they're not a real football team? I mean, truly, like they have gone so far off the radar to being irrelevant, incompetent in 2 years that when you bring up a guy who plays for the Giants, I'm like, is that a real guy? Like, is this, I mean, I've seen him in fantasy, but I don't remember watching him at all. They are as lost at the wheel. Like, this is why when I talk all the time about the timeline and the important big picture stuff that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has done and getting the quarterback and having all the ducks in a row with the cap and all that stuff. Because you look at a team like the Giants, you just go, what are they even doing? Like what? Like they don't know who their quarterback is. It is freaking March 20th. They don't know who their quarterback is. They have Tommy DeVito and no one else. And like, we're supposed to take you seriously? Sorry, I bet their running back will get a lot of attention this year because they don't even have a quarterback. They can't, Rodgers doesn't want to go there. I mean, it's just like, what are you even doing? So I think it's a good pick though. For fantasy people though, next year, like Tyrone Tracy's a good selection.
I think they're one of the few teams that just have no identity.
Yep.
You think of that team and it's like, what are they built on? Like, pretty much all the NFC North teams are toughness. Well, KOC's kind of changing it to the pass heavy air raid, but normally it's like toughness, and same with the AFC North. And it's like, what do they do? I thought it was going to be their D line, but it was still kind of like eh. But I like Tyrone Tracy, and I think he reminds me a lot of Tony Pollard, like a little more explosive Tony Pollard. So I think he's gonna take a next step.
Matt says, imagine having a top 5 pick and sticking with Daniel freaking Jones. Not just that, but imagine being right in line to draft Jaden Daniels or to draft Drake May. And
you only get the job once.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that they beat the Packers with Tommy DeVito and that like screwed up their tank. Is that right? I mean, something like that. Like, there's like 1 or 2 games in there that they won that they shouldn't have, and it cost them getting either Jaden Daniels or Drake May. And that is just craziness. Kind of like how the Vikings, I don't know if you know this, Clay.
Was it Drew Lock?
It was,
did Drew Lock step up this
yeah,
year?
that was last year they had Drew Lock. The year before that was when Daniel Jones got hurt and they played Tyrod, but he got hurt. And then they went to Tommy DeVito and he beat the Packers, I think. I don't know if you're aware of this one. The Vikings won a insanely meaningless game against Washington on, I think it was Christmas Eve, to cost them Andrew Luck. They should have had Andrew Luck, and they won a meaningless game, and they drafted Matt Khalil instead. And that didn't work out too good.
Yeah, that's painful. That reminds me of shout out Lovie Smith, because when he was coaching the Texans going into the CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams year, they were playing the Colts, I think.
Yes.
And it was like, they were terrible. Yep. It didn't matter. And then they go on a game-winning last-second drive to win and lose the number 1 pick, which led to the Bears getting Caleb Williams and DJ Moore and all that stuff. So it's stuff like that is crazy to me.
Matt, yeah, I believe that was the game where Adrian Peterson also tore his ACL. Yeah, so at least he came back more than fine from the ACL tear. But yeah, though it's not only that Lovie Smith sort of went for it to not get the number 1 pick because he knew he was getting fired, which sort of blew up on him because they got Stroud instead of Bryce Young, but they may have picked Stroud anyway. But that it was Davis Mills on the last play of the game. He throws some crazy pass into the end zone, like on 4th down. And so we were in Chicago as the Bears were tanking. And this was also really funny. They were trying to lose that game on purpose. So I think they were playing Nathan Peterman against the Vikings, and the Vikings were taking out their starters. Peterman was sort of playing competitive football, so they took him out and put in Tim Boyle to play worse football to make sure that they would not win that game, and they would still get a higher pick. So very, very, very funny stuff with that. Okay, so we got sidetracked on your potential breakout players.
Yeah.
Who was after that?
I think you'll like this one. I got Boye Mafe out of Seattle.
Oh, okay.
I think
that is a deep cut.
I think he's an underrated edge rusher. In 2023, he had 9 sacks, and then this year he kind of took a dip in production. But I think it's because Coach McDonald came in and he uses more of a rotation scheme. But he still had 6 sacks, and I think with DeMarcus Lawrence being added to that line, if you're next to him and Big Cat, it's going to be easy to get one-on-ones and a good matchup. So I think he'll get back on track to his 2023 days and really break out and have a big year.
I like Boye Mafe a lot. He's a gopher, which I think is what you're referring to, and one of those freak athletes that you hope develop. The question I have about this one, as far as like anyone from Seattle breaking out, would be, what is Seattle exactly? Is Seattle just a middling team that's floating around in an ocean of other teams? They're not incompetent. They're not total fools. They have a GM who's won a lot. They have a great fan base, great venue that I visited for the first time last year. I know all those games they went out to Seattle, I had either had a previous employer that didn't want to pay for that, or it was the COVID times and I didn't make those trips. So I got to go for the first time last year. It was great. Love that stadium. Incredible fan base. But they've kind of been in the Viking Kirk type of just in the middle, good, relevant, but not really relevant for the Super Bowl. And they get Cooper Kupp. That's fantastic. He's 100. What are you really going to be? They get DeMarcus Lawrence. And then DeMarcus Lawrence makes a comment about like, well, we weren't going to win in Dallas. I'm like, are you going to win
You're
there?
not going to win there. All right.
You might though, but here's the thing about that. So Matthew Stafford is 100 years old. And if Matthew Stafford gets hurt, he was declining last year in his performance. He played great against the Vikings and he was good enough to get them close against Philly. But his overall performance was not an amazing year last season. If he slides and the Rams just don't win a lot because he finally has hit that old man wall, there's really nobody to pick it up there. I mean, San Francisco is fading. They'll be mildly competitive. Arizona, I think, is improving. Seattle might just win the division and then get a great place in the playoffs because you didn't change the stinking rule. So the Vikings will win 13 games. Seattle will win 9, and then they'll host the Vikings in the playoffs, and the Vikings will lose.
That's kind of how. No, it might go like that, but I don't see the Vikings losing to them in the playoffs. They can't let Sam Darnold do that to him.
I don't know. That would, if he's at home, though. That's the point. If he's at home, he was great at home. Aaron suggests Bryce Young is a breakout. It was like a half breakout last year.
Yeah,
but no one was paying attention or really cared because Carolina. I do think that that's very real and that they could compete for the division because Tampa Bay is getting a little older and they squeezed out a lot last year. And New Orleans is still New Orleans. Bleh. And Atlanta, I mean, I think Atlanta's the favorite to win the division with Michael Penix, but an unproven quarterback still. Carolina, I don't think can win the division, but they could make it interesting for a wild card spot if Bryce Young plays the way he did last year. The switch just came on for him, and all of a sudden it was there. So I think that's a great nomination, Aaron, for a breakout player.
Yeah, I like that one. I didn't think of it just because I feel like they still need to give him some more weapons to really succeed and have a true breakout. But yeah, I really like Bryce Young, and he showed a lot of what he could do towards the end of last year. The next person on my list is probably my favorite on the list, all bias, Romo Dunze. He had 700 yards last year with incompetent coaches, and he was a wide receiver 3. So now that Keenan Allen is gone, I think he'll get a bigger role. And he also has Ben Johnson and Antoine Randall out coaching him. So I fully expect over 1,000 yards and at least 8 touchdowns. So,
what we were just saying about JJ McCarthy, I think is also going to be true for Caleb Williams, where they will absolutely give Caleb Williams all 4 years to see what they have there of his rookie contract. And gosh, some guys are so hyped up in the draft, like Trevor Lawrence, even if you're not good at Lawrence is like occasionally good. Even if you're only occasionally good, you're going to get that next contract because they invested so much in you and there's so much hype and there's so much potential. So Caleb Williams, what I think we're going to find out, because he's got a Dunze, because he's now got a coach, he's got a line, they're going to get a running back, I think, in the draft. There's really no excuses. And he's got his experience. He's dealt with the pressure. They've got him everything that he needs there, including a system that has gotten top offenses in Detroit. You're going to know by the end of the year, you're going to have a really good sense. Like, can this guy handle the heat, or is he just going to get sacked over and over again and frustrate you and disappoint you? And is it Justin Fields all over again, where people like some of the stuff that he does, but their schedule is going to be harder along with everybody else's in the NFC North. So it will be a hard track for him, but let's say with the Vikings, they've strapped the jetpacks and the training wheels. I mean, at very least, there's a strong wind behind Caleb Williams, as opposed to last year where it was just such a culture calamity that it was hard, I think, on everybody there.
Yeah, I think this is truly the make or break year for them. Like, Chicago's either going to be finally happy or the city's going to burn down because it didn't work out somehow. So there's really no in between for them. They need to show something. They can't just have another subpar, not even terrible year. So they need to do something. And I think Rome will be a big part of that.
All right. Who is the last one? You're in Eastern time. Your mom sometimes watches the show. She's going to be upset that you're staying up too late talking about football with your friends. Yeah. Who's your last one?
My last one is Azeez Olojuwari. He just went from the Giants to the Eagles, and I know he's dealt with a lot of injuries for the most of his career, but something about it just seems like the Giants just gave up another good one to the Eagles, because he had 6 sacks last year in 11 games, and now he's going to a team with a deep rotation and a lot of talent next to him. So I could easily see him being a rotation 8 sack plus kind of guy.
It's just such an Eaglesy move. Yeah, they have a really good sense for what risks they should be taking. And the Vikings are kind of doing this with a Jeff Okudah or an Rondale Moore, but I think Ojulari's shown a little bit more than maybe those guys have, especially more than Okudah. It's just environment matters to everybody. We usually only talk about it as for quarterbacks, but if you can take pass rushers who are decent, remember Derek Barnett was not any good. Their first round pick, who was actually used in a pick that they got for Sam Bradford, but he wasn't really a great player, didn't have a great career, but he had that one great season or decent season for them, contributed, got the sack in the Super Bowl because he was with a bunch of freaks on the D line for Philadelphia. And anybody who they bring in is going to succeed. Your mom is watching. Okay. Hi, Mrs. Clay's mom. So
great burner, by the way. Great.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No one will figure it out.
No one will know. Yeah.
Well, my mom watches too every single night. So I appreciate her doing that.
Yeah, I appreciate the support too, Mom. Shout out to you, Mom.
The Eagles, though, and maybe your mom has a take on this. I think that even though they've lost some talent and hysterically will get more comp picks, which is just really funny. It's like, how do they always do this? I don't see much changing there for their expectations for next year. I mean, they should, because sometimes a team wins the Super Bowl and you go, oh, they just lost like half their roster after that, or they were just all, banged up and played so many games. I don't see Philadelphia doing that. And now, like last year, they had the drama. They had does AJ Brown really get along with it? Is their coach a dope? But now that you won the Super Bowl, the coach isn't a dope and everybody should be friendly with each other. I think that Philadelphia is going to come back just as strong or stronger than they did last year, even with a couple of losses in free agency.
Yeah, they just have great leadership over there. When you have Jalen Hurts and Saquon in the backfield, it's just a different feeling. When like Hurts has a different mentality. It's like McCarthy is really in tune to the mental side of the game, but Hurts is just like a killer.
Yeah.
Like he plays no games. He's always thinking about how to get better, just always focused. So when you have a guy like that, it's hard to really see a decline, especially when they have the best team in football. So I could see them definitely giving it a chance to run it back. And then if we move on to my final headline question, quote, whatever, March Madness started today. And every year there's a team or two who shock the world and go on a Cinderella run. So I wanted to ask you, who's your pick for a potential surprise team in the NFL that could be the bracket buster?
You got to think about this. Who's yours?
So I have 3 teams, but 2 of them are basically the same: Patriots and Bears. I feel like they both have a really talented young quarterback, and then spent a lot of money in the offseason to really build the infrastructure around them. So I could definitely see them improving from 5 and 4 win seasons. And then the other one is Atlanta. I feel like people know they're good, but I think they're still kind of slept on. And they took the Commanders to overtime in Michael Penix's second start, and that's when the Commanders were on fire. So I think they could definitely use some improvements on defense, but I think they could be a team that shocks the NFC.
Careful now. That's Penix. I don't want to get YouTube.
My fault.
I don't want to have to put a parental warning on YouTube. I got 2 teams that are a little bit of long shots here for this, but Jacksonville with a new coach that is very KOC-ish. Now, he doesn't have the vibe of KOC, as you saw from him trying to say Duval. Yeah, that was like a creepy Duval as opposed to get us hyped up. But it's the offense that's worked for so many quarterbacks along the way. Randall goes with the Raiders. That's an interesting pick with the Raiders. That division is just so hard, though. I don't know. I think Gino's going 8-9 again, or 9-8. But with Jacksonville, it is a offense that's worked for quarterbacks. They've invested in it, and it's a bad division where you get some free wins there. And last year, it just all came apart. And when a team is not as bad as their talent, or is way worse than their talent, so that team was way worse than their talent. They should have been probably an 8-win team, and they were a 4-win team because everyone just quit and gave up. But they've got players who can be competitive. And I think if they buy into their new coach and the system, that they can be better. The other one that I was going to go with is Arizona, who I think really showed a lot of progress last year. I am not a believer in Kyler Murray being much more than a 500-ish type quarterback, but I think Jonathan Gannon did a lot with a little last year. They gave the Vikings hell at US Bank Stadium, probably played the best game against the Vikings of anybody all year long, it felt like. And I think he's a good coach schematically. They've got a few more things to work with in free agency. They got Dalvin Tomlinson there. So I think that they could be, as the West is kind of teetering, the NFC West. The Rams need Matthew Stafford to be great. The 49ers are coming apart and trading away their good running backs for some reason, which I still don't quite fully understand. The Panthers are a good pick for this. I don't think the Broncos qualify since they were in the playoffs last year. We're talking about 16 seeds here, like Jacksonville and Arizona would be like a 12. They'd be like a 5-12. So, but I think when I look at this, I try to think, does the door get opened by their division and maybe their schedule? So very interesting. Good stuff, Clay. Good stuff. Very well done.
Thank you.
But I did think that after being assaulted about being old the other night, that maybe you needed some of that back on the other side tonight. So
No, I'll take it.
Thank you for your time. You're working on a cool piece about the NFC North and how everybody is believing in themselves in the NFC North. So I'm looking forward to that over at purpleinsider.football. That is where I'm currently working on my Friday mailbag and my reaction to Ryan Kelly and everything that he had to say. So make sure you go check that out. So thank you for your time, Clay. And thank you everybody for watching. As always, it's a real fun stream. Really appreciate all the interaction, and we'll see you guys pretty soon. I've got a conversation with Alec Lewis up on the YouTube page and the podcast feed, so check that out. I'm hoping to be a little less active this weekend from a podcast perspective. So we'll see. You never really know in Viking land. So thanks everybody for your time as always. And we will talk to you all again very soon. The plan is not to go live again until Monday, but Vikings. All right. We'll catch you guys later. Football